to That's a Fact, your virtual women's circle for South African women creatives. I am your host, Kirsty Adams, and beside me is a very exciting collection of wonderful female femme women creatives, Mikhaila Smith, Tessa Barlin, and Emma Van Heyn. I'm going to let them speak about themselves. So let's have Mikhaila introduce herself.
Firstly, thank you so much for having us all here today. It's such an honor to be in a circle with such incredible women creatives. So I'm Mikhaila. I'm a composer, a film composer. I'm an orchestrator, a pianist, and just a lover of all things art, as I'm sure we all are. I was born in Cape Town, but I am based between Cape Town and New York at the moment. It's a bit of a strange time in the world. And yeah, music has been a part of my life since I could breathe. I studied composition and piano at the University of Cape Town before I moved to New York, my favorite place on planet Earth, to pursue a master's in film scoring.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirsty. This is an amazing platform and I'm just so excited to be part of it. My name is Tessa. I originally come from Johannesburg, but I moved to Cape Town to study at UCT. And I've just been here ever since. I am just in love with Cape Town. I'm a documentary filmmaker with a passion for wildlife conservation and environmentalism. I focus on stories of conservation. I look at the intersection between nature and people and focus on highlighting local stories, local voices, and people on the ground who are actually making a difference to save wildlife. I'm very passionate about inspiring other people to feel connected to the earth and to the natural world where we come from. And that is my purpose in life, and that's what I do.
My name is Emma. Full name is Emma Van Heyn, and I just shorten it to Emma Van Heyn for just general purposes. So basically, I was born in Johannesburg, but lived most of my life in Cape Town. There was a time period that I lived in China and worked as a musician. But before then, yes, I am a music producer and a songwriter and a singer. I've recently gotten into cabaret, which has been a lot of fun. Yeah, I would just say that I'm a general creative when it comes to just marrying visuals and music and kind of putting that together. So I think we're a really lovely group of ladies that are here, and I'm just really excited to see kind of where this conversation is going to go, because I think you really, Kirsty, you chose a lovely combination of ladies. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and I love that you said creative, being just a general creative, because I think a lot of us are afraid to say that we are just creative beings overall, and we feel like, okay, we need to define musician, songwriter, composer, filmmaker. We can be all of that. Yeah, I chose you guys specifically because you are all somehow, including myself, involved with film. I've produced music videos myself, and I understand, you know, what the vision is. I love the combination of audio and visual, and to make that come alive. I think they make they complement one another and make each other come alive. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to be asking questions around how you perceive the film/music industry, how they combine, and yeah, that is how we're going to commence. The first question is, what are some of the interesting things that come up in a film composer or musician and filmmaker relationship, Emma?
I'm the first. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, my main, I would say, I think it's basically depending on who you are dealing with. So let's say you are a musician and you would like someone else to direct the music video, let's say. There's a lot of aspects that's added to it. So let's say I am the subject or the object and I want someone else to direct me, but I've made the music for it. It's very scary to almost kind of hand over. Even you often even have a concept where you go, this is my concept, and then next thing they go, cool, here's a mood board, and it's not at all what you were going for. But you have to trust the process, you know. And I think that's one thing that I've definitely noticed in, you know, let's say handing something over to someone else. You almost have to have the surrender factor, especially when you're making the music. You kind of have this audio idea, but a visual idea is a completely different world. And to kind of allow the filmmakers to dive into their version of what they are hearing audibly, it's very important to allow them to do that, because it might just be a flop otherwise, because, you know, you might have an idea of what they are hearing, but they're hearing something completely different, and they might actually enhance the song even more than you'd originally expect. But the other side of what I've noticed as a musician, when it comes to, let's say, directing your own version, I mean, I've more recently decided to try and direct something. Debut, I'm a complete amateur, but I tried to direct something, and I was working with the DOP, and I had produced this piece of music for a very long time, and I almost had this visual concept, but because it was so specific, I kind of thought, well, it's actually another filmmaker, director said to me, why don't you just try directing? So I tried, and I decided I don't want to be the person in it. I want to get a completely different person, deal with a dancer. And I think that created also very interesting challenges, because I realized that that performer was so specific. He's a professional dancer, but he was so specific about trying to capture my vision, when I'm kind of like, just have fun, like, I want you to move and use your own creativity. But because he knew that, you know, he was quite I would say he really enjoyed the song so much, he knew I made it, so he wanted to honor that. And I think that is also a very interesting process, is to be able to kind of let someone understand that although maybe this person wrote it, or this, you know, let's say wrote the script, or made music, or did anything like that, it's kind of, you know, their job to take the reins of that moment and make it theirs. So I think there's been a lot of interesting things, you know, when it comes to the music. I have definitely learned to surrender more compared to how I used to be in the beginning. I used to be very specific, where things have gotten a little bit more fluid. But yeah, I think generally, I think the main thing with, you know, being a music maker and working in a film is to create an environment that's fun and enjoyable, because it's long hours. But yeah, when it comes to the music part of it, I think it's more just about showing, you know, selling the idea and making it exciting, you know, for everyone.
I resonate with that. Tessa, what do you have to say about that?
So, really interesting question, because Kirsty actually composed the music for my honors film, The Water Dancers.
Hi! I'm not meant to interrupt, sorry. But just keep going.
No worries. But, you know, I think that... So, during The Water Dancers, I was the cinematographer, so I feel like I had less of a directive role in it. And then moving into Beyond the Fence, which I shot and directed myself last year, and had a composer on the job, well, on the project, I really started to realize just how vital having a synergy between your composer is. Because the audioscape, the music, and just the sound in general is literally 50%, if not more, of a film. Honestly, like, you can have beautiful visuals, but if you don't have the sounds, like the correct sounds and the correct music to go along with it, it's just very flat. And I think that an example of this, I think my favorite example is Blue Planet 2, because we've all seen a lot of underwater films, but I feel like Blue Planet 2 was one of the first ones to really bring in those like Foley sounds and bring in that soundscape. It was like one of the first times that a global audience actually got to hear what it sounds like underwater. And also have the swishes and the bubbles and the crackles and, you know, all those things that you don't really think about, you don't really associate with being underwater, but it just on a very subconscious level, it just adds so much depth to the film. So moving into the actual question, which is the relationship between your composer, I think that being on the same page is so important. Open, honest communication is so important, because as creators, we all kind of have an idea of what's good, what sounds good, what looks good, what fits the visual, what doesn't. And I think that the sound dictates what the audience is going to feel in that moment. So another example is with Beyond the Fence. The opening scene, I had in my mind that it was going to be, you were going to see these beautiful drone visuals of the bush, you know, sweeping shots, and you've got Queen's voice. She's one of my protagonists, talking about how she feels when she goes into the wilderness, and that is a sense of calm and release, and it's almost meditative. And then my composer, he made a first draft of it, and the opening shot, he had like very light, bubbly, I would say cute kind of sounds, and I was like, the music is beautiful, but it's not the feel. And it was kind of difficult for me at the time, because I don't make music. Like, I can't tell you, okay, you need to play this instrument or this note. I don't have those kind of technical terms, but I can tell you what I want to feel in that moment. So it was an interesting process of trying to find out how to communicate in that way, and how to find a middle ground, because he would ask me like, okay, do you want some strings in here, or do you want like piano? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what would be an appropriate instrument. I just know what I want to feel and what I want my audience to feel in this moment, you know. So as we went through it, and we sat together for hours and hours on end, and we went through it so many times, and like second by second, like frame by frame, we were like, we mapped out the whole film, and we're like, okay, in this point we need to have a bit of a dip, and in this point we're starting to go into a climax, but then in this point there's like another obstacle, and it's like a bit of a, you know, the protagonist gets a bit of a hit, so it's a bit of a low point, but then we're still going up. And sometimes you're going up, but you're also going down at the same time. So it's, if you know what I mean, in terms of emotions, you're trying to take your audience on an emotional roller coaster in a way, but also bringing them to this beautiful climatic point, I guess that's the word. And you're trying to, I just feel like music and sound is what does that. Having that closeness with your, like, you don't have to be best friends, but you do need to have a sense of communication, and you do need to be very open and honest, and find ways to get onto the same page to make the projects happen, because we need each other, you know. You can't have films without composers.
I like that answer.
Down answer, but I hope you got something out of it.
So much. Mikhaila, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, and you know, I'm also going to, it's really true what Tessa says about communication, because that's the thing that I'm going to point out. I think that the whole relationship itself is extremely interesting, because, you know, you have to bring someone's vision to life musically, and you're also both coming from, I guess I can say, different art worlds with different forms of communication and expression, and that kind of needs to come together. So for me, communication is always an extremely interesting thing. I think Tessa spoke about having to only being able to explain how she feels because she might not have the terms. And as you know, when we speak about music as musicians and as composers, we have a language. You know, we have a way of expressing things, what we do, our creative choices, our work. It's all expressed using a specific vocabulary that we've, you know, spent our lives studying, learning, and developing. So I found that you can often find yourselves in spaces with people who come from different art worlds, who may not necessarily speak the language you do or really understand the complexity of what you do. And I think that's why communication is extremely important, and being able to have that understanding with your director and the people that you work with, because you'll find yourselves in rooms filled with people who may not be able to understand, and you have to express yourself and communicate your work and your mind in that space. Yeah, so I find that to be an interesting thing, just finding that trust, finding that communication, coming together, collaborating. It's a really beautiful thing. I think it differs across the board. I also think it depends on who you're working with, what the project is, what the vision is. But yeah, I find the process of communication very, very interesting.
That's so true. Shouldn't be using a pen here, but there's my click. So as part of all these questions, I also get a chance to answer where I can. And yeah, so the way I would interpret this is, I always think, when I think of a filmmaker and musician relationship, I always refer to my first experience, which was the water dancers, actually. With Tessa. So yeah, that was very exciting. And the thing that I find most interesting about this relationship is how the two languages meet, how the two types or lexicons meet. We have to learn one another's jargon. So I'm like, okay, what is a cut? What do you mean by the final cut? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? I had to like go and Google the crap out of this. For me personally, I love researching. So I like to, find those things on my own and things. Although we should not be afraid to ask each other what it means, because obviously by the next time that you work together, which is most likely the case, depends like what kind of relationship you guys had or whatever, you can know how to resonate with one another. When I talk about jargon and terminology, so on my own music, I work specifically with my producer, Ben Ludick, and he and I have a very interesting relationship, because it's like, okay, we're very specific about our terminology. Like, if we want this sound, we need to give it a certain analogy. And, like, if I want something smooth, like I need to specify whether it should sound buttery smooth or whether it sounds peanut buttery smooth. Like, you come up with your own little terminology things, and then that's how you develop your relationship. So it's interesting, because I find that the same like terminological exploration that I have with Ben Ludick is what I have with filmmakers as well. So I think it's interesting, but it's beautiful at the same time, how it develops. And I think people should just continue with that. And of course, like a lot of you guys said, it's to do with, how you resonate with that person, and if you work well with that person, and if not, then, the opportunity will come elsewhere. It's just not meant to be.
I think that analogy of having buttery smooth or peanut buttery smooth music is like incredible, because at the end of the day, what we're all doing essentially is art, just kind of different languages or just different expressions of art. And you can't really define what art is. You just feel it, you just feel it. So I love how you bring taste into it, or flavors or colors, because these are kind of things that we associate, like we can feel these things when you play a certain note. You might like remember a taste or a smell. These are really interesting ways to describe just whatever feeling you're going for.
Yeah, totally. And that just depends on who you're talking with, who you're dealing with. Do they deal with analogies? Do they not deal with analogies, etc.?
And I love what you said about just the marriage of the two languages. It's just such a fulfilling and such an experience to learn from. I'm just constantly blown away at how those two can come together and can create something that's just, I don't know, I just find it really magical. So it's It's really incredible. And I love the way you put that, just bringing those two languages together. And as a composer, I also have so much to learn, you know, about, like you said, the jargon and the terms. And yeah, it's incredible.
I think my dream is that people can understand that there is the space of figuring that out and being like thinking out of the box to describe things. On that note, I'm going to move on to question 2. So question 2 is, do you think there is more room for women artists to take up in your industry?